Hey, Phoenixes. Heather here with this week's episode of Release Your Phoenix. And it's been a couple of weeks since I've hopped on here. I've been really focusing on my next shifts in my personal growth, as well as getting lined up with some amazing individuals, lighthouses that I'm going to be interviewing here in the next few weeks. I've got one that we'll be interviewing next week, and the next one, she's on vacation, so divine timing. So we'll see when that happens. So anyways, this week, it's come to me quite clearly to really dive into the major shifts that I have experienced and embodied on my journey, along with the shifts in understanding and application and expression of those shifts. What I've found is that as I've healed new things and gone to deeper and deeper layers, become more authentically myself, really found my boundaries and my authentic expression in areas, I've also had to learn how to express those things. You know, sometimes I would end up with a cognitive understanding of something, but until it was really, truly, fully embodied, I didn't know how to express it. And the full expression of it is that last little part of the full embodiment of these things. What I found was that as I made these shifts cognitively, the way that sometimes I would express them would be, or the way that I would sometimes try to hold the boundaries, etc., was to control how others were doing things with me. And it would sort of feel indignant or a little aggressive. I'm not really sure exactly. Those words don't fit completely, but sort of like, I'm not going to let you do that. How dare you? You know, there was this energy behind it. Well, I'm simply not going to allow that. It wasn't from a calm, centered space. And it was sort of from it was really from a not knowing how to hold that space for myself, really, so that others would also hold that space. So anyways, we're going to start. I've got, I think, like 6 things here. I usually don't take notes. I usually just kind of get it in my head and go through them. But I really wanted to make sure that I hit on these notes. And this has really been therapeutic for me. And I'll get into why with actually one of these little steps here. So the first major shift that I went through was a process of forgiveness. Forgiveness of others and forgiveness of self. And it's a really powerful one. It's something that can be really difficult. And for me, the understanding that really helped me was the full embodiment of the understanding, the heart-centered understanding that everyone is really acting from the space that they are at in their emotional maturity through the veil of their wounds. And this goes for anyone who's hurt you, anyone whose addictions have hurt you, anyone whose actions have hurt you, even if that is to the level of them murdering someone that was close to you. These people, none of these actions are excusable. We're not excusing them. We're not condoning them. What we're doing is recognizing that every single person on this earth is dealing with their own wounds, with their own trauma. And every person is acting at the capacity that they can, based on their perspectives, their belief systems that have been created around those wounds. Somebody who's seeking vengeance is seeking vengeance because they're lashing out because of where they are emotionally with themselves, with their relationship with themselves, and because of the blame that they're putting on others. This all comes from emotional maturity and wounds. So once you really fully embody and realize that it's not as personal as we feel it to be sometimes, and that it's also not just random, like, why me? You know, sometimes things happen. It's true. In this life, things happen. But oftentimes, I believe all of the time, and this may be triggering to some people, but I believe that our soul came into this dimension, into this time frame, at the time that it did, with the other souls that have agreed to interact with ours in a certain way to bring us to levels of healing, of understanding, of emotional maturity, if we are open to seeing and allowing those shifts. So I came into this life and I believe that I had the agreement with the soul that incarnated as my father, that this trauma, this sexual trauma that I experienced, which was traumatic, obviously, obviously, I grew from that. I learned forgiveness. I learned that other people's actions don't reflect on me and are not my fault. I had emotional maturity that I gained in my soul's expression because of those things. Now, the things that he did, he has to live with himself. He has to learn to forgive himself. And that's a whole other level. When you've done something that has harmed someone else because of your wounds, this brings us to another level, right? My father hasn't forgiven himself, even to the point that he can admit what happened. In order to achieve that, you have to accept where you are on your path and accept that everything that you have done, every habit that you've had, every wound that you may have created in someone else, number one, you were acting at the capacity that you had at the time. It doesn't excuse what you did. You're not trying to make excuses. You're simply accepting and loving yourself, understanding where that came from, and it helps to actually dive into the action or the habit that caused the grief for others, to understand what was beneath that, what pain, what grief, what addiction, which means there's a hole that's trying to be filled. What was lying beneath that, and address it. The best thing that you can do is address the underlying cause and heal it. That's the best thing that you can do for yourself, accepting and loving the self. And for whoever was a victim of that, an apology means nothing. An excuse means nothing. Action, healing, a changed soul, a cleared soul, not a changed soul, but a soul that has been healed and cleared of these wounds and blockages that is causing you to act in these ways. That is what makes a difference for everyone else as well as yourself. So that is forgiveness. That is the those are the understandings that I had, and really working through these shifts. I mean, I can't pinpoint a tool that I used specifically because I literally, for all of these things, there may be a couple here and there that I can pinpoint, okay, this shift happened because of this one thing that I did or this one thing that I cleared. There were a few very clear things where that happened. But for me, because this journey has been so continuous, almost a daily practice of different tools and integrations that all shift things sort of, they all work so energetically, and things sort of happen over even sometimes a short period of time, but it's hard to tell and pinpoint exactly which one. But these are the shifts in cognitive understanding that I've gone through. If you're doing the work that you're led to, if you're doing the work that resonates deeply with you, there are so many modalities of this. You'll have these shifts. So the second one for me was love of self. And that really, that follows on the heels of that forgiveness. You really have to be able to accept yourself first to be able to dive deeper and really learn to love yourself at a deeper level. And for me, that came through exploring myself, exploring my energy, really getting in touch with what lights me up, following that and trusting that, really listening to that inner knowing of the things that resonate with me and trusting that to be my truth. Even if at some point it shifts, the truth that I had 2 years ago has shifted so dramatically as I have gone through my journey of healing and furthered my emotional maturity. That's shifted, and that's okay. It should shift. We should be open to that shifting, to continuing to listen to what resonates as we move along our path. As we raise our vibration, higher vibrational things are going to resonate with us. And those lower vibrational things are going to be cleared out and released. Really also diving into and understanding the energies that create my soul. So every single person has a masculine and feminine energy expression in their soul. Each one of these expressions, I've gone on to a deep dive into this in my previous podcasts, but every single soul has its own unique expression of these energies. And so many of us, when we begin this work, have major imbalances in these energies, and particularly in our society, in our Western society here, we have a lot of imbalanced masculine energy dominating both in our men and our women. And we have a lot of feminine energies that are being repressed in favor of others. And this causes all kinds of behaviors and expressions that are imbalanced. So for me, really diving into those energies and seeing the ways that they're expressing within me, bringing those into a balanced expression and really seeing how those expressions how those energies, express through my soul in an authentic way, really diving into, for me, really diving deep into that feminine energy. And I know for men that are on this path who have really done a deep dive into that masculine energy, into whichever energy is dominant for you, and really getting to understand at a deep level that energy, and then also really understanding how the other energy, that lesser expression of energy, is expressing through you as well. It just brought me to such a deep understanding of myself, an embodiment of myself, that just, I really was able to fall in love so deeply with myself through that exploration. And I continue to do that. There are new levels, always the better it gets, the better it can get. And so there are all of these new levels that I'm exploring, and I just continue to fall, deeper and deeper in love with this energy that is the expression of my soul. Another way that I have really fallen in love with myself is through doing things like this. Really taking the time to look back at how far I've come, not to live in the past, but to appreciate the shifts that I've made, to really look into what shifts have I created and embodied? What kind of results has that created in my life? To feel that deep appreciation for yourself and how far you've come, to really celebrate that, is often something that we overlook. Oftentimes we're looking ahead at the next thing. So really taking that time is not only therapeutic and also wonderful for your vibrational energy, but it's a really wonderful form of love and acceptance of self. So the next shift that I really, really had to deal with, and to be honest with you, this is something that, it's also ongoing. The better it gets, the better it can get. Was boundaries. And I say that actually in quotations because my understanding of it to begin with was as boundaries, as walls, as lines that shouldn't be crossed. And, to begin with, there were so many levels for me of boundaries that were from outside sources, from societal expectations, from religion, from what you should and should not be doing, the shoulds. You shouldn't have sex right away in a relationship. You should be, as a Muslim, covering my hair. You should be praying. You should be, all of these religious things. You should be, you should not be drinking or doing drugs. Drugs are bad. Okay. There are so many shoulds, shoulding all over myself. And I lived in that for a very long time. And when I started doing this work, oh man, my soul was like, It wasn't even something that in the beginning, I didn't recognize really a whole lot of what my shifts were. I just recognized what I was struggling with. And I didn't really recognize as this, so many of these as a struggle with boundaries at all. It just came up because it was ready. And a lot of them came up right away and were triggered right away. I've always had an interesting relationship with pot smoking. It's always been around me. And I've had this, I've had an interesting evolution with that. I had an interesting evolution with my modesty, my boundaries of my body, what I reveal, what I don't reveal, creating external blocking mechanisms physically with clothing, trying to block those things, just, so many, when I should be having sex in relationships, if I should be having sex before marriage, if, I'm dating someone that I come to a point where I feel that I'm ready for them to meet my children. When should I be introducing my children to these people? It seemed so arbitrary to me, and I didn't want to be playing games. My biggest thing was always, I'm not going to play games. If I feel it, I'm going to do it. So oftentimes that led to an inadvertent devaluing of myself because I had not embodied the love, self-worth, and value of myself in order to express authentically that value. So, sometimes when I would go through these things, as I was making these shifts, I would experience an extreme opposite of wherever I had placed the boundary, which tended to be an extreme opposite of, extreme of one side. And then I would kind of explore the other so that I could find the balance. Other times it would just be a continuation of a triggering of a certain thing so that I could really find my boundary on it, what did I truly feel in my heart, what resonated with me about this thing. I found a lot of that with drugs and smoking, of other people in my life. I don't do those things. Maybe I smoke pot occasionally, which I'm totally fine with, and I've always been totally fine with. But I would get these people that come into my life that feel the same way, and then all of a sudden they're like potheads, or all of a sudden they start smoking cigarettes when they had said that was disgusting, just like I did. It was always a deal breaker. I would have these things triggered so that I could see, how am I going to hold that space for myself? And oftentimes what I found was that it would come out, like I said, in a trying to control the other's behavior. That doesn't work. So eventually I discovered my authentic boundaries, but I had no idea, again, how to express those things. For me, the answer in expressing that part of it came really from embodying my understanding and my resonance as a love for myself and others. Again, a recognizing that the things that they're doing are based on their thing. It's based on their soul's journey. They're not there to trigger me. They're not there to disrespect me. Any disrespect that you receive or anything along those lines, it's, again, not condoning it. Just accepting to the level that this is your thing. However, it's a no for me. And this comes to saying no to men, even like who asked for my number, which I'm not really interested in giving them my number. I didn't want to be a bitch. I didn't want to hurt their feelings. I didn't know how to. So sometimes I would laugh it off or make an excuse. Oh, I've got a boyfriend. How do you hold that boundary for yourself? And it came again from honoring myself and honoring them. Hey, I see you. I appreciate you. And I'm not going to go to the level of, oh, I'm flattered, because listen, if I'm not attracted to you, it's not necessarily flattering that you, like, what am I lowering myself? That no, of course you're attracted to my energy, because I do believe that I have beautiful, vibrant energy. So thank you. I see you. Thank you for expressing that, because that takes courage. And, but it's a no for me, but thank you. And that has always been received so beautifully. And if somebody is being disrespectful, no, you don't accept it that way. You let them know, you know what? That's disrespectful. I don't appreciate that. And they oftentimes, when you come and say something like, oh, that's disrespectful, I don't appreciate that, they often come back with an excuse. And I say, my go-to with that is, if you saw a man approach your mother, your daughter, or your wife this way, would you accept that? Would that feel respectful to you? And oftentimes that creates a shift where they're like, oh, and sometimes their ego gets in the way and they just want to argue. And, that's fine too. You can let it go. But you can always honor yourself, speak your truth, and see the person. See the behavior. If you want to do that, if you want to smoke pot every day, that's fine. In my life, that's a no. That energy for me is a no. So if that's what you want to do, then that's fine. They have the choice to also respect you and honor you or leave. You can invite them to leave while accepting that their behavior is right for them and their path. It has nothing to do with you. So that's what I found about boundaries. Also recognizing stories, recognizing beliefs that we have about ourselves, labels that we've placed on ourselves. I know a lot of people who, and this may be triggering for some people, because we get stuck in these stories. We get identified by these labels, PTSD. ADHD, even autistic when we're just barely on the spectrum. You know, allowing these, oh, and addicts, depressed, stories that we have about our life. I know people who are living, telling, repeating the same stories from childhood or 20, 30 years ago that are just still so hurt by these stories. They're still repeating them. Let me tell you something. Every time you repeat that label, every time you see yourself as that label, every time that you repeat this story, you're living and confirming it today, right now. And you're going to continue living and confirming it as long as you do that. If you can bring yourself to a point, oh my gosh, it just came to me too, unwell. I'm unwell. I'm sick. My body is sick. My body has given up on me. My body is broken. As long as you have these beliefs, it's going to continue to be reflected to you. And like I said, there are so many people that are really stuck in this, that this is going to trigger. And they'll be like, no, I'm sick. What? My back hurts all the time. My knees, I can't. Like, well, I have arthritis. Okay, well, listen, yes, you do, but no, you are not that thing. Your body has a response. Your body's telling you something. The body is made to heal when we address these things. The mind is made to heal. The soul wants to express fully through this body that's made to heal. If we allow the correct balance to flow through from a nourishing diet. I'm not talking about dieting. I don't diet. I eat high in good fats. I eat high calories. I eat, I eat well nourishing food. If we, that's a whole nother podcast. But if we do the work to clear our energy blockages, so many times energy blockages show up as physical manifestations in our body. So many times that, this has been scientifically proven that water molecules respond to energy, and our body is water. So yes, you can shift these things. And yes, labels create a cognitive block that if you can release these labels, you can heal the wounds beneath. Releasing stories, releasing labels, being able to conquer the ego enough to get to a point where you're willing to look past that and release it is huge. So that is point number 5. So far, or point number 4. So far, just to recap, we've gone through forgiveness, we've gone through love of self, boundaries, and expressing those boundaries. We've gone through recognizing stories, and really the biggest next one kind of connects a little bit to these stories, and that's fear. Recognizing fear responses, not just fear responses, but anger and frustration. These are areas where I recognize that I'm giving away my power. So, again, so many of these have had so many layers over the past 2 years of this continuous work that some of them stick out as powerful. I give my power away to money all the time. I'm doing it much, much less now than I used to. Again, money is one of the ones that I'm still working with. But in relationships, giving my power away, we do that a lot when we become codependent, needy. We feel fear oftentimes in relationships, fear of losing the other person. What I found is that when I'm in a relationship and I begin to fear that the other person is pulling away, that I may lose them, every single thing that I say and do is colored by that fear. I'm no longer expressing authentically because I'm acting from fear and not love. And it takes courage to be vulnerable and authentic. And it gets hard to do that sometimes with someone who our energy is so deeply entangled with. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to remain authentic and honor yourself and allowing expressing that self and knowing that this person can take or leave it. And it doesn't mean that you'll do that without trepidation. It doesn't mean that it doesn't take courage. It doesn't mean that it doesn't take vulnerability. But when you don't act from that space, when you act from fear, it's repellent. It's always repellent. And to a certain level, simplistically, it's manipulative because you begin saying things, doing things differently than your authentic expression in order to prevent this person from leaving, to keep them with you. And it's not in a mean way, obviously. It's just you're so afraid of losing them. But that's manipulative. And I had that reflected to me actually in a relationship where this person felt that I was manipulative, but I wasn't. I was not. Like I've never been that person that would purposefully manipulate someone else, but it's not on purpose. It's not a cognitive, oh, I'm going to do this so that they do that. But ultimately it is. I'm not going to say this thing because they might leave. I'm going to try to say it this way, or maybe I'm going to try to express this thing in this way so that they don't leave me. But at the end of the day, don't we want someone, and I'm going into a relationship here because that's, the thing that came to me. But at the end of the day, don't we want someone who we can express ourselves fully and authentically with, who feels open and trusting enough? Trust the other person. Trust your process. Trust the connection enough to be open and authentic. Don't you want them to feel that way also? And the truth is, if that person can't handle your 100% authenticity exactly where you are with your wounds and everything, then it's not the match for you anyways. Don't ever put aside your desires or don't ever dishonor yourself in order to keep somebody else in your life. It's not worth it. Shine every bit of what you have, every truth of what you have, and all of the wounds and all of the veils, because those will never be gone. It's a process of always diving deeper and deeper into these understandings. So you have to express yourself exactly where you're at in order to achieve the partnership, because here's the next level, right? Everything is a mirror. This is the next thing that I learned. Not the next thing, but this is another shift that I learned. Everything in our lives is a mirror. Every person, every soul, every situation that's brought into our lives is brought into our lives to show us something about ourselves. Now, that's not their sole purpose, because when it comes to friendships and relationships, there's a much richer, deeper purpose to that expression of your energy. But it's also there to help you to become the fullest authentic expression of yourself. And that means working through wounds in order to be able to achieve that expression. It means burning through those layers and making those shifts. And our intimate relationships and our relationships with our children are the two that reflect that to us the strongest most times. Sometimes it's a boss, sometimes it's an enemy. But this work and our next layer of healing is always reflected to us. in those relationships, in the places where we begin to feel fear, where we begin to feel anger, jealousy, frustration, any of these lower vibrational frequency feelings are pointing, it's a gift to us. It's not about the other person's behavior. That's their thing, right? It's pointing to us where we have our work. Because we're not here to point our finger at the other person. And I was at this point in a relationship when I realized that everybody's here as a mirror. So let me help you grow and you help me grow, and let's point the finger at each other and show each other where we have to grow. That doesn't work. We have to kill the ego and look back at ourselves and recognize that you're on your journey and you are wherever you are on that. Maybe you're making progress on it. Maybe you're looking at these things. Maybe you're not. But if you're listening to this, you are working on your things. And just recognizing that, looking at it, spending time with it, taking space to see these things for what they are inside of yourself, honoring that, diving deeper into it, creating those shifts. And the thing is that you may outgrow that relationship as you make these shifts. Maybe that person will grow with you. Maybe they'll shift with you. Maybe you'll outgrow it. Maybe they were there to show you this growth and then move on so that you could achieve a more higher vibrational relationship. At the end of the day, I would rather go through, I've dated and had many relationships with beautiful souls that have achieved such incredible healing for me, so many incredible shifts that were such incredible reflections and models for me of behavior and shifts that I was making that no longer resonated after those shifts were made. And that's perfectly fine. You know, that's what we're here to do. And, you know, to be open and ready to call in that next reflection. Maybe it's a friendship, maybe it's an intimate relationship, who knows? But just being open to calling that in, to allowing yourself to grow. Let me see, what do we have here? So then, you know, the next thing for me was just how to express and communicate all of these things as my authentic self. Okay, so I'm understanding my boundaries, I'm loving myself, I'm valuing myself, and I've gone into a little bit of this stuff, a little bit of how I learned to express this. But what I realized is I didn't know how to express it. I would come to a space where, again, I didn't know how to express these things. And for me, the boundaries thing, it really just turned into honoring myself. And I kind of got into this with the boundaries part of it. But in all of these layers, it turns into an honoring of yourself, of where you are, of the space that you need, of your truth, and recognizing that doesn't have to be somebody else's truth, and recognizing that your path is not going to be somebody else's path. They may be adjacent and you may be able to share while your paths are adjacent. And maybe that's going to be a long-term thing where they're adjacent, or maybe that's a shorter term thing. But just recognizing that, you know, their journey, their path, their actions are not personal, being able to accept that and being able to honor yourself, being able to speak your truth. And that really takes just connecting with yourself and really finding your words that resonate with you, that are respecting the other person's space and situation. And, you know, that just, it, for me, that was just a process of diving into it. But, you know, I have a little quote here that came to me last night, actually, as I was thinking of this podcast. Two things. What I've recognized ultimately is that I can only truly love, accept, and respect others to the extent that I can accept, love, and respect myself. anytime there was a deficiency in those areas, anytime I felt a deficiency in those areas from someone else, or anytime that I have felt a trigger in those areas with someone else, it's always back to my relationship with myself, because everything is a mirror. And if the things that I'm saying, not in this podcast alone, but in all of my podcasts and all of my, my YouTube series and all these things, if they resonate with you, if anything that anyone says resonates with you, that's because it's a reflection of you and your situation. What I say is not going to resonate with someone who hasn't gone through these things, who hasn't experienced these struggles, who isn't at the same frequency that I am, or along the same frequency path that I've been along. It only resonates if it's a reflection of you. So trust that. When something resonates with you, when it feels right, trust that. Follow that. That is your path. That leads you to your healing. That leads you to these soul connections that further your path. That leads you to these soul connections that become so deep and delicious and intimate and beautiful on so many levels, whether that's a friendship connection or an intimate connection or a child's connection, parent connection. There are so many beautiful connections that can be had, that you can bring into your life when you are resonating at your authentic frequency, when you're expressing your authentic self. I think the most appropriate kind of cliche meme that I've heard that reflects this is a meme that I said, and the moon said to me, "You don't need to be whole in order to shine, my dear." And I think that's something that is so powerful and so important for us to remember when we're on this journey and we're feeling like we have so many wounds to address, and we are feeling so out of touch with ourselves, and we're feeling like there's just so much work for us to do. You don't have to be whole to shine authentically. You don't have to be whole to radiate that light. You can be authentic and love yourself exactly as you are. So that's this week's podcast, guys. Thanks so much for listening. And again, I love feedback. I can't wait to jump in with you guys next week. I'm going to have Josh Carey on here. He is a fellow lighthouse whom I met through another mentor that I've worked with. And he's also a podcaster. He's a fellow podcaster. And I think you guys are really going to love the episode. We're going to dive into some of the shifts that he's had and the tools that he's used in order to achieve success where he is. So until next time, take care, guys.